You are listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Protean Machining, and this week, super happy to have you back on, Pete Oxenham of Chatter. How's it going, Pete?
Hello. And Toolpath now.
And Toolpath, yeah. So, we're obviously going to go down that route, but it has been, let's see, we're on 249 now, and it was 116, episode 116 that you were on last. So lots has happened. Let's get into it, man. How has the last handful of years been?
How many years ago was that then?
2 and a little bit.
2. Okay, I'm trying to think
Almost
what
3?
life was like back then.
Yeah, you had just, I think, announced the beta.
Okay, so we had just announced the beta. Yeah, if you don't know me, I'm Pete, founder of Chatter, and we'll get into what I'm doing now. And yeah, we had just launched the beta of Chatter, and I believe this was around the time that I was thinking about selling my machine shop. I don't know if we ever covered that on the podcast, though.
I don't think so.
I think when we last left off our story, I was still running a machine shop and trying to start a software company by accident. And as of, 2022, I ended up selling the machine shop and going full-time into Chatter. So for the past basically 2.5, 3 years now, it has just been machining software land for me.
Yeah, so actually you brought up a great point. I forgot that whole thing happened after your last episode. How did that happen? Selling your shop, I can't even imagine that, like selling your baby, basically. Like, how did you come to that decision? How did it go about finding, someone to sell it to? How'd you feel afterwards? All of that.
Yeah, so there's a lot to get into, but I'm excited because I don't think I've really shared the story. So obviously the background is that I started Chatter kind of by accident, started in the machine shop really with no name. It was just our internal stuff. And then other people wanted it in their shop, so that became a software thing. And then basically I was running both. And by the time it came to like launch Chatter and actually get like real, users on the platform, it was just taking up just a huge amount of time. And I'd grown really passionate about it. Of course, super passionate about machining and that business. But running a shop is, as you know, as everybody listening knows, that is already in and of itself more than a full-time job. So I sort of had to make a decision the original plan was I was going to get somebody who was going to be able to run the shop, like the day-to-day operations. And I was hoping to, be able to figure out how to pay a pretty good salary and then build in some pretty much partner level equity into the shop for whoever the right person for that role was. And talked with a bunch of people, had a couple trials here and there with folks. And at the end of the day, running a shop, especially when somebody can, you tell me, Dylan, did you know what you were getting into when you started a shop?
No, I would never have done it.
If you had seen what you were going to get into on day zero when you're thinking about starting a shop, do you think you would have been down to do it or just scared shitless?
Oh, scared. And also, I can only imagine if you're broaching this to somebody else, they have the potential for equity, but at least for, Brad and I and you, it was your business. So you knew from day one you were going to benefit 100% from it and all of that. I can't imagine asking someone to sign up for that. Kind of cold turkey. So
basically it's a huge ask, and it's a job where everything's on your shoulders, especially at a small shop. So, long story short, wasn't really able to find the right person for that role. And essentially I gave myself a deadline at a certain point. I'm like, man, I'm freaking exhausted. If I don't get somebody for this role in a month, I'm going to sell the shop. I don't know how I'm going to sell the shop. I have absolutely no clue how that's going to happen, but I can't do both at this point. It's impossible. So around that time, a former employee of mine / friend of mine, we went to high school together. He hit me up and he was like, hey, I'm thinking about buying machines, want to start a machine shop. What do you think are good machines? And I said, well, I think a bar-fed Haas ST10Y with live tools and an Enshu GE480H are a couple good machines. And they're located in Roseville, California. But realistically, we got to talking, and I was like, man, do you want what do you need? And he's like, well, live tool lathe and a mill. I'm like, all right, cool. We've got that, and the shop's already stood up. all that work just to get a working shop together is there. Of course, with that is kind of all the debt of having run a working shop, which is that, some stuff's really well organized. Some stuff is a wrench that's been sitting under a cabinet for 4 years. So there's pros and cons to it. But one of the really nice parts about it too is we had an existing job shop customer list that would come with the business. So as they're getting stood up, they had a certain amount of people that, there were already fixtures and programs and whatever. So they could kind of hit the ground running with everything already being set up for that part as they roll out sort of their own business and own products. So we were talking about that for a while and putting that deal together, and basically just sold the shop in place. At the time, we were renting 2 suites right next to each other. So they just took over the lease on the one suite where the machines were, and I stayed out for the rest of the lease on the chatter side of things, and that was just the chatter office next door. So it was cool. We got to kind of keep that magic of chatter being built in a machine shop, being used, in real life and tested on real machines, making real parts, and hand that off, and obviously kind of try to help them out through the transition. And it was great to be next door because we didn't have to get too crazy about, and that we're friends, right? We didn't have to get too crazy about all this stuff of you get X amount of hours, blah, 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 of me helping you, get up to speed on these jobs that have fixtures and programs and yada, 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 right? It was just I'm next door. Hey, text me, I'll swing by and I'll help out. So it was a little surreal. I just one day was like, hey, you want the keys? I'm like, yeah, sure. And that was kind of it.
So was there a specific moment when you were running both that really told you had to sell the shop, or was it kind of a gut feeling of just being overworked for months and months?
I can't remember a moment. It was just sort of just this building feeling of dude, I am way out over my skis here. And then eventually, you're getting I don't want to call it a bad spot, but you get in a situation with something, and then eventually you get to that point where you're I can actually do something about this. I'm not stuck in, because that's how I felt. I love, building a business, running a machine shop, all that stuff, but you do sort of become a slave to it at a certain point because you're just tied to it. You're married to it. Your entire life's work is in there. Your entire life's saving, your credit, everything is stuck in there. And then eventually I was well, I guess it just didn't even cross my mind that I had the option to sell it. And then eventually I was thinking about it and then gave myself that ultimatum, and now here we are.
Yeah, I'm glad you did, because I remember talking at the time, and yeah, you definitely seemed at your wit's end with both things. And it was man, you got to do one or the other, because you can do one or the other very well, but you can't do both for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing is we could get the machine shop, keep it running with existing clients, but I couldn't put my full focus into it. And I couldn't put my full focus into growing chatter either. So it was do I want 2 businesses that just are inherently going to be stagnant? Or do I want to really focus on one and do something I'm passionate about?
Yeah, totally. So I guess then let's get into growing chatter. How did a guy who started a machine shop, fresh out of high school and wasn't quote unquote a software guy, how did you go about growing chatter once you had, cut ties with your shop?
A lot of lessons learned along the way. And just like anything, I didn't know how to program a lathe when I bought my first lathe. I could sort of program a mill, but you just kind of learn as you go. We had a little bit of runway across the front. We did this thing called the launch accelerator, or it's just me at the time, basically. And then Kat as well doing, part-time software development. And so we did this accelerator, startup accelerator. They take some equity, they give you $100,000, and then you go through this thing of pitching to all these VCs and whatever. And that, well, actually, I'm not raising anymore, so I can say it was torture, man. It's the world of the show Silicon Valley is so accurate. And I wasn't even physically in Silicon Valley because it's kind of that post-COVID era, 2021. So everything had switched to Zoom, and they just run you through all these pitches. You got to get your tight 3 minutes and for the accelerator, demo day, and then you got to pitch every week. And the VCs and stuff were nice, but you go in there and they want these huge visions, right? They want you're going to change the world. You're going to be the next Uber, like, because that's their business model. They're looking for like massive exits, like, Facebook level, Google level stuff. And they're willing to let, a bunch of companies die in the process. It's just kind of the nature of the beast with VC. So going through that, it was tough for me because I'm just a machining nerd. I'm not a software guy. And I need to raise money. But I'm interested in like the nuts and bolts of the situation. And also, given that everybody I know and everybody I talk to pretty much is like into machining, I've completely lost my sense of like how to even talk about this stuff to somebody who has no idea what it is. And so it was really weird going through the VC stuff because I would constantly just be getting what to me were just the stupidest questions I've ever heard in my life. And really it was like, I'm just talking like just in a different world than these people. They're focused on the business and the scalability, and especially in like what they see as enterprise software, like these like, building out a scalable sales organization where you can say, okay, like this is our ROI on like one salesperson. So as soon as we can figure out our customer acquisition costs, right, our CAC, now we just pour money on this fire into a Series A and a Series B and a Series C. And I mean, everybody in machining knows you get all these startup software companies for machining, and it's just some salesperson that they just hired. And I always wondered, I was like, where are these people coming from? They don't know anything about machining. And as it turns out, like in the VC world, for B2B software, they really, really want you to like establish this, what they call a flywheel. And I didn't like that. I hate sales. I hate cold emailing. I hate getting cold emails. I hate getting my door knocked on. And I love products with a community. And that was sort of the initial traction we had with Chatter, especially at the beginning, was folks who had just heard through word of mouth. And, I'd talk to these investors. I pitched alongside 5 other companies, and a lot of them were like pre-revenue. I mean, we had a little bit of revenue, but of course, that Silicon Valley show is accurate. That scene where Russ comes in and he hears the word revenue and he freaks out. And he's like, don't get any revenue, because once you get revenue, investors are going to ask how much, it's never going to be enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's so true. So, and like, well, what's your customer acquisition cost? I'm like, I don't know. How much does it cost for me to like have a friend who had a conversation with a friend of his who said he was checking something out and that person wanted to check it out too? Like, I can't tell you. Like, and then they're all, we don't know if that's scalable, yada, yada, yada. So it was really frustrating to me because that just wasn't really where my heart was. And I've seen so many software companies. I mean, not that I'm better at it. There's some people who are just like great salespeople and great at building and running sales orgs. But to me, it's just so not where my head's at and not where my skill set lies. And I'm like, I don't know. I can't really, I'm not going to be able to do a killer job at something that I don't like.
Right.
So
well, yeah. I remember you sent us a link to watch. I think it was the last pitch for your cohort, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
And that one was just, it was very, very interesting hearing the questions that people were asking you. Like, I specifically remember that one lady asking, like, but why the box? And, like, literally we're all in a group chat, like, what does she mean? Like, why is she even asking about the box? Like, who cares? And it was just very
and the funniest thing is, like, you guys were joking. Sorry to interrupt. You guys were joking about that. And I was just like, dude, that's like nowhere near the dumbest question I've got over the past 8 weeks.
Yeah, it was just so funny because, like you said, these people don't know anything about manufacturing. And so to hear that, like, that's what she latched onto. You had a very tight 3 minutes, talked all about manufacturing, but it was like, yeah, but why the box? Like, why are you sending out boxes? And literally we're all just like, who cares? That's, of all the questions, like, that's not what a shop owner would ask. And so, yeah, it was very, very interesting to see where their mindset was.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was the sort of VC and sales thing. So you're asking about initial traction. That was a lot through just word of mouth and people, and really, it's great in the early building stage because you can move really, really fast and you can get direct feedback from like a small cohort of users, and then sort of decide what to build and where to focus, what limited capacity you have being stretched across all these things. But, it was a good time kind of learning, getting back into the software world, because I'd done it growing up as a kid, and then sort of came back into it and everything had changed. Like, it wasn't just like, I think when I was into it as a kid, it was like jQuery was like the new like hot thing, and like PHP or I guess like Ruby on Rails was huge too. Like that was like, the highest tech, and I come back and now everything's just on all these frameworks and stuff. I'm like, what is this? So I had to relearn a lot. But yeah, so it was interesting getting into the software world and just seeing what these companies do in terms of their business model and how they run sales, how much money they spend on engineering. They're just these companies with like, because this was like right post-COVID. And during COVID, any stupid company any remotely feasible company could get funding.
Right.
And you just look, and these people had spent like $6 million on engineering for an app that like was supposed to like, buy a gift for your dog that had no customers yet. And, it was bizarre. And during that time, kind of the funding in VC world, like just like flipped on its head to where folks, the interest rates went up, and then the checks stopped flying around like that. So it got a little bit harder. And I was like, you know what, screw it. Like I am spending all this time on this pitching stuff, like to VCs and whatnot. And like there was a period that was like kind of dark where like, I was spending like probably 75% of my time just on pitching VCs and researching VCs and having meetings with them. And it was just like, I was just like, this is not for me. I want to be building the product. I want to be working with like my user base. Like there's a reason that I enjoy making software for machine shops, and it's because I actually like machine shop owners, and I like machine shops, and I like what's going on in there. The business side of it, I found I'm not trying to be like too negative, but like it's just it's not really my knack. It's the product and how it works in a machine shop. Like that's the stuff I love. So it's a nice journey of sort of just learning about myself too, as cliche as that sounds, but really like, all right, what are you good at? What do you maybe like can fumble your way at being average at? And what are you just absolutely terrible at? So,
right. So then I guess, how did we get from there to where we are now? I guess let's talk about the Chatter merger and all that stuff.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Chatter is now a part of Toolpath, and I am head of product at Toolpath. So I actually had to learn what that means. But basically, that's a good segue, because basically I get to deal with all the fun parts of the stuff I actually like about software for machine shops, which is how does it work? What does it look like? What are we going to build? How do we develop a sort of user journey of like day one from like discovering the product and maybe trying one thing out or another to actually utilizing, everything the product has to offer. And then how do we kind of look moving forward if we're this company with a sort of like 10-year, 15-year vision? How do we actually get there in a way that's not like, all right, we're just going to build for 10 years, not have any customers, and suddenly we're going to release something and lo and behold, you get real customers on it and it doesn't work right and nobody likes it. It's like, how do we actually strategize that? So that's sort of what the product role is. How we got here is let's see. I can't remember when I first came across Toolpath. I think my first knowledge of it was probably running into Andy on Twitter, if I remember correctly. I was like, oh, what's this? Like, this is interesting. They had a little site. I don't think many people had heard of them, or at least not in my circles at the time. And I went on there, and they were working on essentially this like DFM tool, which honestly, like DFM tools are kind of a dime a dozen. There's been a lot of iterations of this, and at the end of the day, they tend to just show you like sharp corners or like, I don't know, bendy holes that can't be drilled or,
right.
Whatever, right? And there's been iterations of, all these plugins for like Xometry wannabes and, standalone pieces of software that are focused at engineering, standalone pieces of software focused on machine shops or whatever. Anyways, But what I found really interesting about the Toolpath product is I threw this wacky part at it, which is a tow hook that I had machined in a way that I thought was very clever in my head on my horizontal. And I was like, all right, let's see what it wants to do with this. And I'm like, it's going to try to 3D surface all this stuff. It's not going to be able to do this clever thing that I figured out how to make this. And lo and behold, it figured it out. So in like a minute or something.
Oh, wow.
So it really piqued my interest. I think I might have even messaged you at the time, be like, check this out. Like, this thing figured out how to make, this is like almost exactly how I made this tow hook, like in production on the horizontal. What the heck? Like, what's going on here? So got to know the guys a little bit better. And, we were talking and, had been sort of talking for on and off for months and trying to figure out, all right, how do we work together? We're both small companies, and what can we do to sort of close this loop between the shop floor and the CAM automation and estimating? Because I have long been critical of CAM automation because it's very, very static. I don't think it's very useful. I mean, you've seen me get into arguments in person about this. Like, I don't think it's very useful to optimize a feed rate from the 160 that I throw on there to 164.32 because you hooked up a bunch of vibration sensors to your machine and you got all this like optimal data, yada, yada, yada. It's like, you're just like pinching pennies when there's like process level stuff like, hey, like, do we have capacity for this, right? I mean, even like really just large scale adjustments like, hey, like how close are we bidding on our previous jobs? Like all these things at the high level where like that level of granularity is way too low, doesn't have enough, like doesn't pay enough dividends. It's kind of like the like last couple percentage points. And also it just doesn't apply across different shops. Like, if I went into your shop, Dylan, like I'm sure I could fumble my way through a decent program on your brother, but I'm not going to be able to run it the way you run it. I don't know. Well, first of all, I don't know the brother.
Right.
I don't know your work holding, your tooling, your tool holders, all this stuff. It's going to be different. And, when you're programming, you have all this experience with your shop. And that was always my skepticism of CAM automation. I'm like, well, you don't know, like how the heck are you going to tell me in my shop what needs to be done when you've never seen my shop? You don't really know much. Like it always annoyed me when you get these calculators, you have to put in the horsepower of your machine. I'm like, horsepower is not going to be the limiting factor here. Like on this issue, like I'm going to throw the part before
I don't care about your 286 horsepower or whatever universal machine that it always throws at things. It's like, just let me get speeds and feeds, please.
Yeah. So anyways, but back to the story. So we'd been talking, and then, as a lot of people know, Al moved in the CEO role, and then Tim moved in for chief customer officer, and then there were a few other hires at the company who I wasn't so familiar with, but sort of just from these circles, and we had been talking for a while, and then eventually, just recently, a few months ago, the timing finally became right where it just worked with the stages of the company that we were at. And the team they built over there, one of the places, just being like fully transparent here, because this is, we did all our marketing spiel and whatever on the Chips and Tips podcast. So go there if you want to learn about the vision for Toolpath. But this is the down and dirty here on Within Tolerance. But for me, one of the big challenges that we had with Chatter was like actually, supporting, like having the level of support with onboarding that was necessary to really take that next step for a user, where like for me, I'm like, I get lost in like knowing every little nook and cranny of the product and whatnot. It's like, all right, cool, you're set up, like have fun. And I was really lacking in the area of following up with customers and making sure that they're like continuing to be successful. Just, purely from a capacity standpoint. It's like you're being pulled in a million directions. So one of the things that really excited me about coming together with Toolpath was they have a team, or I guess we now have a team that is, the exact people I would handpick, and the people handpicked by the people I would handpick, like Tim Paul and then his crew over there. Like, are just killer at this stuff. And it's really hard to find folks who know how software is run, like how to like be in a software company, and also know machining inside and out. And the Toolpath team felt really special to me because like pretty much everybody there has spent significant time on, in front of machines, like years, maybe even decades in some cases.
Right.
Like, yeah. So it felt very natural, and really like at that point with the new people coming into Toolpath, Toolpath and Chatter already had some shared DNA. I've known Tim Paul for 5 or 6 years now, and he was actually the first machine outside of the walls of my shop to have Chatter on it. The machine in his garage, and he was a first-time advocate. Al, I don't know if he remembers this, but I sure remember it. When I first like put my like demo sign-up thing live of like, hey, check out like Chatter, like if you want to get on the alpha or beta or whatever it was at the time, like sign this up. And he was maybe like the 6th person to like sign up, and it was the first time I ever heard the name Al Watmo, and it's just said like, I lead manufacturing product at Autodesk. I was like, oh, I gotta look this guy up on LinkedIn. Who is this? Like, holy crap, this guy's like a big player. So, and then, eventually I met Al when he was working at Autodesk, and, we would have chats about just, machining and life and software and stuff. And both Al and Tim had always been just great resources for me in learning how to do software for machining. So once they were over at Toolpath, it was like, just kind of like the match that was meant to be.
Yeah, for sure. That's super cool. And I'm stoked that you guys are all working together towards that. I not only, I imagine, is like following up with customers very tough when you're a solo guy or a small team, but even, being on like the Chatter Discord and stuff and seeing the variety of install problems. Like you sent me a box. I told you within 5 minutes I had all my machines online. Like it was that easy because I had already built out a pretty decent network and I knew how to, get around things. And then you would see people, they're like, I've been sitting on my box for 2 months and I have no idea how to get anything working. And it's like one setting change. And I felt secondhand frustration that there was not a better documented way just for most machines to be on the network, or that they were not set up better from the factory. Like it's wild to me that, some, especially it seems like FANUC machines are notorious for just like missing the one feature you needed to be able to connect correctly, and you had to go like jump or something, or like plug something in differently, or it was insane.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes down to, this was sort of at the start of Chatter too, is like, I can't wait on these industry players to change the way they're doing things, right? Like I can't wait on like some box that's like magically going to be able to integrate everything, or wait until every machine has like a consistent data model that you can just plug in like an endpoint and an API key, and then every machine just starts talking, itself up to Chatter. And I can't wait for the manufacturers to make their freaking documentation searchable and accessible and make any freaking sense, like in a consistent way. Because, not only is it like one type of machine, the documents are here, and another it's in a different manual. It's like they call these things completely different stuff. There's like different requirements, and they're hard to find. Like even half the time, like I look at my own manuals, and I was even setting up at a shop last week, and I pulled up my own YouTube video, like one of my YouTube videos, to look up a FANUC thing. And the guy was laughing at me because he just looked at my screen, and I'm watching myself trying to follow along. But this information's hard to get, and it gets really frustrating because so much of like integrating Chatter has less to do with Chatter itself and more to do with getting the network settings right in the first place. So one of the things now that we have a bigger team and people who are like, like Paul and Ben, who are laser focused on making sure the customers are successful with this, we're growing into this, but building out more documentation, building out more like video content. Ben was doing something with Chatter on, I forget what the machine was. I think it was it was a Haas machine. And he's just like, man, like I was like, yeah, go to this doc here. Ben Engel, for anybody that doesn't know him, he's our content manager at Toolpath. And I was like, go to this document here. And, he found it. He's like, dude, it'd be great if like there was just a video like for this. Like I can read the document, but like I need to see you hit the buttons in order, which is funny enough. Like I need to see myself when I forget how to do something, like where the buttons are and all this stuff, rather than a manual. Right. So one of the things we want to do is build out like a better like content library I actually looked up on Google, if you search like FANUC networking, my stupid video that we made in like 30 minutes on just how to network my Enshoe is actually the top result for that.
No way.
So it's like, dang, okay, we got to do this for other machines because, and it's not even necessarily Chatter specific. It's like open knowledge that should be free. So one of my goals when it comes to like trying to make connectivity of machines more accessible is I want Toolpath and Chatter to be the source. It's like, okay, these guys have the best documentation that a machine shop owner, a shop manager, or a machinist can understand, right? Don't give me the networking, blah, 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 blah. Just like pretend that I've like never seen a computer before and just like, all right, this button on your control, this button on your control. Like, just go through it step by step and don't use weird language, use consistent language, nice screenshots, like all this stuff. So we've been building out that stuff. And then also we shot some videos at CJ's shop a couple weeks ago. Shout out CJ. Thank you for letting us use your machines. Shout out Adam Morley. Thank you for following me around with a camera. Awesome. As I fumble through a brother control. But anyways, yeah. So I really want to, I'm looking forward to how the bigger team is a sort of an accelerant to us just making this connectivity stuff more and more easy because it should be the standard going forward. And I think the tools that we're building with it are going to end up being, once we're closing the loop on CAM automation and as these things continue to progress, they're going to be critical to shops. And we need to start at the basics, which is like good core connectivity, right? On the Toolpath engine side, making sure that these parts that get, thrown, like whatever step files, whatever XT files, whatever solid parts you throw at it, like it can take it. And you're not fumbling around with, converting file types and doing like weird geometry stuff or whatever. So, we're starting just with the basics of making sure that knowledge is out there and accessible and that the platform actually, connects to your files, connects to your machines, and then things get talking and then we build more and more features off that solid foundation.
Awesome. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, especially when you're trying to tackle so many different machine types. Like Brother is always going to be Brother, which is really nice. And like Haas is going to be fairly consistent, at least among the same controller. But like I've had issues with FANUCs at past jobs. Like I remember we bought a Doosan and tried to, like it had the file server and I'm sitting there like, I can't access it. Nothing's working. I go and take the back of the control apart. Turns out they had never plugged it in. Like they had plugged the Ethernet into the Ethernet port, but never plugged in the file server. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like you put this in there. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, it's hilarious because it's just like, so like on the Doosons, they'll install it with a file server. Most people don't know that there's two Ethernet ports inside that control cabinet there. One of them's the embedded port, one of them's the data server, and then they route one of them to the port on the back of the machine. And it's, some guy in Korea who's deciding what port, like that's the only solution I can think of is they don't have it documented, or one guy has an idea that, we should ship them with it plugged into the embed port. And the other guy says, no, it should be data server. So I'm just imagining somewhere in Korea, there's this like kind of like Cold War between these two guys at the Doosan factory who can't agree on which port it should be plugged in.
Or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think they both have opinions on it and can't agree. So depending on when you like what time of day your machine was put together, it's different. But yeah, it makes the documentation hard. But at least we can document. Hey, if you're not seeing anything, open that up because there's two ports in there, and it's probably plugged into the one you're not expecting. So, but yeah, so the connectivity stuff. There's a lot of that, and we can do our best to solve for it. It's a big challenge, but really all this stuff is a big challenge, right? AI estimating, automating toolpaths, building a feedback loop, inside a shop that's like self-improving. This is a freaking huge task. Like, and I don't think a lot of people would be up for it. I was having a conversation with Al kind of at the beginning of this, and I hope he's fine with me sharing this. He was a little nervous. He's like, man, like this is exciting. Like, I know it's possible, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, Al, like, if anybody in the world is going to do this, like, we're going to.
Right.
And we've agreed already that this is the inevitable future of the industry. We've seen how crappy all these quote unquote closed loop automation, industry 4.0, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff has been promised for 2 decades. And then it just ends up being smoke and mirrors, or it's just a complete nightmare of like this really rigid system that can only fit in like a factory where it's like, okay, we're going to have a fully automated line that makes 1 or 2 or 5 parts or whatever. And it's going to be down for, 2 or 3 months while we're setting it up. And then it's going to be janky. And eventually we get it going. And then by the time it's made all its parts, now we got to retool it again. And like it only works for high volume. It's like, well, the inevitable future is we're going to be able to build more and more automation into how shops run. So somebody's going to build it, and I can't think of any other team in the world that's going to be able to do it. So you better just, take the plunge and say, okay, like it's going to be us. So there you go.
Well, and if it was easy, it would have already been done. Like that's, it is a very tough problem. And, like you said, I think if anybody has a chance at tackling it, it's you guys. So
I hope so.
Well, we got a ton of good questions from both the Patreon and Instagram. Let's jump into it. Doug from the Patreon, always coming in with the good questions. He said, first, congratulations on the acquisition and joining the Toolpath team. First up, what is the ideal desired state of the feedback loop between a machine and the software creating the toolpaths for that machine?
The ideal desired loop. I'm going to take this question. I'm not sure if this is the way it was meant. Can you tell, Dylan, is this meant like long-term, like what's the final state of everything we're building, or is this something in terms of connectivity?
Well, maybe let's couple it with the second part of it, which is what is your rough estimate on how long it'll be before the industry sees that ideal desired state of CAM machine feedback loop?
Okay, that makes sense to me. Yeah, so I don't really see an end state, but I can lay out a vision. My vision is that a shop is going to be learning in the same way that a machinist learns a shop, right? So you're at a high level, you're almost turning the shop into like a machinist itself, right? Through things that are connected, like your CAM automation and your connectivity with the machines. What that looks like in reality is stuff that's catered specifically to the real magic that makes your shop do what it does best. All the shops I know who are killing it have some sort of thing they specialize in, and then some secret sauce in there that makes them really, really good at it. Like clever stuff they're doing. And one size fits all automation in CAM is a non-starter for me, because it really just turns shops into like commodity businesses. Because if it's one size fits all, that means every shop has to quote the same, and we just know that's not true. Like you sub stuff out to friends of yours in local shops because like, okay, they can do it better. They have this equipment, they have this capability, they have this specialization, etc. Right? So we're getting away from these one size fits all type systems. We're also getting away, which haven't really been implemented too well, and we're also getting away from these hyper-specific systems that were done by like a consultant that was brought in. So imagine every time you make a new part, like you're calling, Cellway or somebody for a turnkey, and there's a whole team on it, right? It's like, that's just not feasible. Right. So we're sort of building what's sort of the best of both worlds, where we have a system that can like look at a lot of information about your shop and create programs based on the special stuff you're doing, right? If you, let's say in my shop, we specialized in electronics housings, and we had certain ways that we would fixture them and certain types of like inspection and whatnot that we would do that ended up working really, really well for our customers and our niche. So a system that can see that, ingest our CAM programs as they're happening, right? See all that stuff, see what the result is on the machine, take that result into account, and actually push that forward into subsequent jobs we do and do, 80% of the work, 90% of the work. That's really what I see happening. And the cool part about it too is it's like, it's private, right? We don't want to be, I was actually just complaining earlier today about, I found a setting in one of the pieces of software I use that it was training some model for everybody to use off the work I was doing. And I was like, well, that's not like, I don't want that, because I'm just like helping out. I don't know. Basically, this company can now sell what I'm doing as a product. And I don't want that, but I would love some AI system that is like, working with me and helping me. Like, for example, like I use GitHub Copilot. There's a bunch of like things for coding that will look at your code base. They probably ingest some data too. I don't know, but it'll look at your code base, And it learns like my conventions, like how I code, right? How we name things, like what like styles of different stuff, what little like it'll even learn some stuff we do. Like Chatter has a really high rate of data going through it. So there's some stuff we do for optimization to actually get that stuff to perform well. And it'll learn these tricks that we're using because it's looking at our code base. So like you've done this trick over here, you've done this trick over here, you keep doing this trick, right? And it actually, it applies that forward into future things. So I see a similar thing happening for CAM automation, where we're just learning all these tricks and we're basically giving you superpowers, and you're building this model inside your shop that's inside your four walls, and it's actually scalable now. You can scale it to more programmers, and those programmers are going to be doing less, basically like manual clicking of geometry and more like overall actually focusing on that secret sauce stuff. And it's basically, I always say like automation is a multiplier, not a replacement. And, we want to take this ratio of machines to humans, and we want more and more machines to every one human. And we want humans doing the stuff they're awesome at. And we want the automation layer to help with that.
Awesome. So I guess Copilot's a really good analogy here. Like, how much of it do you want it sticking its nose in your business? And, I think for that ideal desired state, like how much do you see in the future that feedback loop influencing things? Because obviously, like any kind of data it's going to be ingesting from your machines is going to have to be on some kind of, PID loop, basically. Like you can't have one or two bad parts that, the tool was wearing and I broke it twice, and I had a bad batch of end mills, and then all of a sudden my algorithm's all messed up and it's quoting things 10x longer than they should or something like that. So how do you see going about that in the future?
Yeah, very slowly, very carefully. And the biggest thing there is keeping the user in control, right? Making sure that they have a lot of insight into, and if you've been following along what's been going on with Toolpath, you've started to see a few of these things actually come into the software, and there's more coming that we have planned already. But being really explicit with the user about, hey, why did you do this, right? And then any action it takes, you should be able to say, hey, that's really good. Like lock that in. I don't want something else to change, and then you like do that. Like you made a good decision there. And then if it does something stupid, you could say, hey, don't do that. So the words we use are may, must, may, and mustn't. And I was sort of joking when we came up with that, but because it's sort of silly, but basically giving this an explanation. So like you see that in the tool interrogation feature that was released and stuff like that's just, there's going to be more of that and more of it getting better. And then actually giving you control, like, hey, that's a good decision. That's a bad decision. Hey, I need this feature to be coming in from this side always, right? Or don't ever hit this way, right? Don't use this tool for that. Or, hey, have at it. Like, I don't really care what you're doing. Yeah, these look like some good results. So basically, like, doing it as a more of a pair programming exercise than just like handing off control of your shop to some automation. And, for changes that you'd be, that the system would be trying to make in real time, that's something that we're quite a ways off from, but we will get there. The pathway to that, when I was thinking about it, I'm like, well, it should be, hey, we came up with like 3, suggestions. You can do A, B, C, and D, or I guess that's 4. So you can do those, and then you would say, I don't want that one, these 3 I want, right? And then that creates a feedback loop, not only just between the machine and the program, but now like you're a part of that feedback loop. And then the idea would be to kind of measure that hit rate. And my goal would be that our suggestions get so good that somebody says, hey, like I need a feature to just auto approve these. Like I am getting so annoyed by your stupid software making me click accept. It's like, I want to accept, any change of this nature. Like just go do it. Tell me you did it and go do it. Right.
Right.
So that's sort of how I see the progression there.
Okay. So kind of more how Fusion does generative design now, where it's like, hey, here's a few options. Which one do you want to like pursue? And then you click on one and it like actually chugs on it and makes the model or whatever you could see as more of a middle term UI kind of thing.
Something along the lines of that. I think it has more to do with like, here's the base state. Tell us what you think. Because machinists are very good at telling people what's wrong with what they've done. So we figure, it's an area that's pretty ripe as far as, if you want to build a system that's going to get quick feedback, just show somebody something you've done and they'll very quickly tell you what they think about it. So, and then obviously exposing those controls in a really granular way where you say like 90% of this program's great. I don't like 10% of it. Let's swap these around. It's like, all right, like now we have this data point of like, they want to do stuff like that. So we want it to be a really interactive process where the user keeps all the control and visibility into what's going on and control over the data. But then they start to hand off more and more of it to the system as the system learns what they're doing. And they always kind of have the veto power on it.
Awesome. Doug's question to me was, how would my business and day-to-day life change if my machines could tell the CAM software what happened when they ran a job's toolpaths, and what could be the resulting optimization do for my operation? And I think, the one that I'm more excited about is it closing the loop on quoting and really being able to like track, like, hey, that job that you quoted for 20 hours this week took you 30, or hey, it actually took you 10 and you are a rock star. Like, good job. You made good money on that. Do more of those kinds of parts. And like, I think that to me, because we're running, one-off stuff, like going back to your original point, like I don't care about going from like 160 inches a minute to 165, or like even doubling it in many cases. Like, dude, I don't care. Like, oh, cool. You saved me 5 minutes worth of roughing. But and this is something I use Toolpath for now, like not to blow smoke, but like very often now I throw parts that I quote in paperless into Toolpath, because Toolpath has caught, after the fact, unfortunately, 3 or 4 parts that paperless was like, oh yeah, totally fine. No warnings. Go ahead and send it. And then like I start making it and it's like, oh, that flat surface is not flat at all. It's like a very large dish, and throw it in Toolpath, and Toolpath's like, hey, this thing's really messed up. There's all these warnings, like look at all these red surfaces. And so like now it's become my double checker, and I would really like that to kind of do that at a larger scale of like, hey, jobs like this you typically lose. Like you typically do a poor job of setting these up, or you typically have issues and you create more scrap than you think you're going to. And that's the kind of closed loop that I'm stoked on. JT was asking, will there be options to collect data from non-CNC machines, such as tumblers and grinders, in the future?
And no promises.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. So we've got a few from your coworkers and friends. Al, Tim, and Zap all wanted to know what has gone well and what has gone poorly in joining Toolpaths. Zap was saying going from a solo guy to being part of a team. What's the upsides and the biggest challenge? Tim was also asking, what are you most excited about and most worried about? So give us the rundown. You have completely changed your workflow. You are now part of a team. You are head of something rather than head of it all. What's been the highlights and the lowlights?
We'll start with lowlights and then we'll work our way up. Slack is one of the worst pieces of software ever created. I just want that on the record.
Hard agree. Oh my God.
I cannot use Slack, man.
It's so bad. And it like is so consistently buggy on both my phone and my computer that I hate it so much.
Yeah. But I mean, there are people who like Slack and hate Discord. So I don't know what's wrong with them, but it's anyways. Slack is definitely a challenge, and Google products in general too. But no, more realistically, it's been a huge learning experience. I think you and a lot of people like listening to the podcast can relate to having either never or never recently had like a team and like a specific scope of responsibility. And, part of that is really, really awesome, where I have folks I can rely on who I'll just say like, I'm so honored to be a part of this company for machining.
Fair. That's a machine.
I'm so honored to be a part of this team, because these are folks way above my league. So it's really cool having awesome folks to be able to rely on for things, and not having the weight of the world on your shoulders. That part is really great. The big adjustment for me has been learning how to stay in my lane, because when you've been the dictator your entire career, and now all of a sudden you're part of a team, some of the calculus changes there. Like when, in a machine shop, when I was running my machine shop, it was always like, we're not going to sit here and deliberate about these decisions, because like, all right, like we've got like 3 ideas that are like nearly equally as good. And by one may take this amount of time, one may take this amount of time, and people have different opinions on it. It's like, by the time we like hear everybody's feelings about this and which is the fastest one and get everybody's opinion about it, like we could have done any of the 3 options and the 4th one that was not as good, and this stuff would have been totally fine and out the door and dealt with. And I'm willing to take on responsibility if things go sideways. Just put it on me and I'll deal with it. So not taking that attitude anymore has been something I've really had to learn. It's freeing and it's neat, and you have to learn to trust other people. Luckily that's easy because our team is awesome and has stuff that, I just see every day. Like they're, constantly just proving how great they are. And it's really amazing seeing stuff like come to fruition that I like barely even like knew was like going on. Like Ben will post in our Slack, or actually not even, I won't even see him in the Slack. I'll get a notification on like my phone. And it's like, oh, CJ Abraham, like chatter, like customer story. And I'm like, what? I was there for like the filming, and then I never really heard about it again until I saw a YouTube notification. And I look at it, it's just this like awesome video with like a sick crew, and it looks amazing. And I was just like, wow, this like feels like magic. Like things are like running really nicely. We got a bunch of really talented people who are working on this. So that has made like the letting go a lot easier, because we have great people. At the same time, there's, some muscle memory there that has to be broken just in terms of snap decisions.
Right. Yeah. How have you found, like, what's been your go-to mantra or whatever to keep yourself in your own lane? Because I can't even imagine going back to working with other people and then having to just be like, well, you know what? I got overruled. They were like, oh, you know what? That's not how I would have done it. Because like at this point, it's like, this is how I'm going to do it. This is how Prodium does it.
Yeah. My mantra has been, I trust your judgment.
I like it.
And making sure that those words come out of my mouth, and I can learn to do that, because working with a team, it's like, you got to trust other people's judgment. You can't have it all on your shoulders. And luckily we have a great team. Like I just said, I went on about them for a while. Like that seems to, be proving out to be a successful strategy. So I'm pretty happy with it.
Awesome. Yeah, you've seemed much less stressed when we've talked, and I'm very excited to see that.
It's funny. I've been busier, but I've been less stressed.
Right. Yeah. It's fantastic. Let's see. Tux Garage asked, what is your view for Chatter for the next 6 months? Where do you see yourself then?
Yeah. For Chatter in the next 6 months, I'll just kind of share some of the internal stuff that's going on that will kind of give folks an idea of what is a great question. Glad I get to talk about this. So the biggest thing with Chatter that's happening in the next 6 months is we're getting our team internally up to speed on how to do this. So we've been talking a lot about the behind the scenes, which I'm happy about. Like, I think it's fun to be able to give this perspective. Chatter is a company that was built with, between me and Kat, we built all this technology, and a lot of this just exists inside our heads. And, we've been going through this process already for a couple of weeks now. And a lot of the next 6 months is going to be getting this information just out of our heads, putting the tech stack under Justin and getting things better documented. And then, getting the customer success team up to speed with integrating Chatter. Our guys are great and they've done an amazing job already. And then just really working on leveling up the onboarding process and getting some other ideas in there in terms of, what Tim and Paul and all those folks can figure out in terms of like, all right, what's the best way for shops to be using this? And now that we have a dedicated team for it, how can we walk people through being successful?
How does it feel to have people going through your code? Is it like having people, find that
it's like pulling my pants down in front of Justin.
Yeah, it must be terrible. Because I even look at programs I've written for the machines 6 months ago or a year ago, and I'm embarrassed by the things I've done. And so I can't imagine the tech stack that you have built over the last, 4 or 5 years or whatever, 3 years, whatever it's been. I can't imagine it's comfortable having people now go through all that.
Yeah. But it's a good discomfort when you have a team that you trust, because there's a lot of stuff in there that is going to have more technical resources now too, to be able to go through with a really fine-tooth comb and, just go through this code, make it more updatable, maintainable, and more solid, and actually have a lot of sets of eyes on there. And it's, not just a bunch of charts that Kat and I have of like how everything works and the classes, and, we know it all, like bringing it to a team that we trust with this tech stack and really has the chops to cover it and maintain it. Like, I wouldn't have done this thing with Toolpath if I thought they were going to burn the tech stack to the ground, rather than, make it 10 or 100 times better.
Right.
So it's definitely in good hands as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Tuck's other question was, what's your favorite machine to use Chatter on, if you have a favorite?
Enshu GE480H, serial number 366.
Yeah, I had a feeling that was going to be the answer.
That was the first machine on Chatter.
Let's see. So from IG, we had a few people. Emergo CNC just said thank you for the Raspberry Pi transfer tool. He loves it. It's amazing, and especially that you're giving it away for free. But we had people asking, Justin from PDX, and also Emergo asked, it seems like you've been able to do a lot of fun development projects to improve quality of life. How do you accomplish that while also getting real work done? And Justin asked, will Chatter tools like file transfer remain available and be maintained?
I am very happy to say yes. We actually had a lot of conversations about this. Justin and I, since we're software nerds, are super passionate about open source. We think it's important. We're also the type of people who get frustrated when things aren't as good as we want them to be and would rather just go build it ourselves and share it. So Toolpath has as a company, we have that in our DNA, and we're super passionate about it. And, everybody, Al, Tim, the entire team, like Andy, Justin, like we're all just on board with making these tools, because we want to be a company that is really part of the community, as cliche as that sounds. This is an important way for us to do that, build these things. And, the financial investment that goes into that is not as significant, obviously, as building a CAM automation engine, but these quality of life things that we can build are just so great to be able to do for the community. And, we use them ourselves as well. So that stuff's not going to stop.
Awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. So speaking of making things better, John at the shop asked, how many times have you been asked to try and resolve the floppy emulator file size issue for ChatterSync?
The real question is, how many times have I asked other people if they know how to do it? The story behind that, or for anybody that doesn't know, ChatterSync is basically a wireless USB flash drive you can put together for $32. You get a Raspberry Pi, and it acts like a flash drive, and you 3D print a little enclosure, and then you can send programs to a machine that doesn't have FTP. It's more or less like a Raspberry Pi turned into a FANUC data server almost.
Right.
But one of the limitations of it is that some older machines can't mount file systems that are over 1.44 megabytes. So that's what he's asking about for anybody out of the loop. The truth there is that I put together the initial iteration of ChatterSync in a weekend. It's something that had been in the back of my head for a while, and once I released it, there were actually a bunch of people saying I've been thinking about doing this forever, and I just never got around to it, and I had been in the same part, so it wasn't really a novel idea. It's just nobody had done nobody had just posted it and done it yet. So I was like, screw it, 2 days, I'm gonna knock this thing out. And the hardest part of putting that together was figuring out how to properly create the virtual volume that the USB drive is emulating. It's this really strange thing called OTG, on the go mode, that the Raspberry Pi Zero can do, where it actually emulates the USB backwards. So the documentation for it is very, very poor. And evidently I figured out one weekend how to properly get this thing formatted. And I haven't been able to replicate whatever it does or whatever it did since. And I have put up a GitHub issue. I have asked in Discord. I have put a call out on Twitter, which a bunch of people replied to, and nobody has been able to figure it out. I have spent hours with ChatGPT trying to figure out, please reverse engineer whatever I did here. I've tried these literally 15 different ways that I can think of that I might have done it, and none of them work. If you're listening, go look at the ChatterSync GitHub repo and take a crack at it if you know anything about Linux file systems.
I love that you have stumped yourself. That is amazing. So Noosh asked, what's been the most exciting thing about the partnership? And also our friend Tom Z was asking, can you share anything new that is coming out soon between either Toolpath or Chatter? So I wanted to kind of lump that all in with shop news and new things. Is there anything you can share that's on the near-term horizon?
Near-term horizon. Sure, I'll share it and maybe I'll get in trouble, but whatever. So on the near-term horizon, our estimating is getting a lot better. The engine side of it has been really, really good. But actually, this goes back to a question that you asked earlier about sort of the control. It's one thing that the estimating has been lacking is this sort of user control aspect to it. So in an update that's coming real soon, we are going to have a lot of really great stuff in terms of estimating and being able to, get those things dead on and sort of give you all the levers you need, rather than just getting machining times out and a rough, dollar figure, give you controls and presets so that it really is tuned to what's going on in your shop. So that's the next thing I'm really excited about.
That is incredibly exciting.
You've seen it, right? You're on the cab.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is it good or bad?
I'm stoked. I mean, I gave my little bits of feedback, but the fact that I only had a couple little bits of feedback, I think should tell you how much I liked it. It's good stuff.
Awesome. Sweet.
All right. We've got the questions from the Patreon. They voted on it. These are the last questions I ask every guest every week. First up, one CAM, metrology, or business tip or trick that helped you this week.
It helped me this week. Shutting up and listening.
I dig it.
Yeah.
It's tough to do, but I completely dig it. All right, another one. What challenge are you facing and where are you looking for help?
What challenge am I facing and where am I looking for help? I am trying to learn how to implement a product development pipeline that is fast with a team that's growing. And as somebody who, isn't used to working on big teams, it's a very fun challenge. And, there's a lot of stakeholders at the company. There's the developers, there's the back end side of things, there's our product or our customer facing people, and learning how to balance all that stuff in a way that at the end of the day makes the customer really happy and doesn't slow down the cadence of releasing as we grow and get faster and faster. That has been a big challenge for me. That has been a really fun one to tackle, but it's just a lot of learning.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I bet. So where are you looking for help? I mean, just asking everybody you know and...
Yeah. I mean, I there's a guy named Zach who he's actually really the one who taught me how to design a product, like a piece of software that actually works good and looks good at the same time, but puts function over form, but it's still a pleasure to use. And I've been leaning on him a lot for stuff of hey, what do you do for this? What do you do for that? As you're part of a bigger team. So I've been looking for a lot of help on that, and certainly leaning on people I know who are much more talented than I am so that I can get better.
Awesome. Work-life balance. What does it mean to you and how do you manage it? Is it any different from 5 or 10 years ago?
I'm probably the worst person to ask about healthy work-life balance. If anybody I work with is listening, close your ears right now. I freaking love my work, and in the interim, or not interim stage, in the beginning stage here, it's basically all I've been doing for the past month or two is just like sun up to sundown with all this new stuff on my plate and transitioning chatter over to the team. It hasn't been much of a balance. It's basically Toolpath, chatter, and meals.
But you seem to be enjoying it, which is really
it's a
nice
freaking blast. I sent the team after my first week really being part of it, or I sent Justin a message. I was like, hey, dude, I'm working like crazy, but this is seriously the most fun I've ever had.
That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. All right, last up, what thing that doesn't really pencil out have you bought that you wouldn't be without just for reduced aggravation, fatigue, or aversion?
AirPods. That is the last great product that Apple has ever made.
That's a bold stance. I like it.
Yeah. No, just it's one of those things that's inspiring, especially now that I'm building software and want things to feel a little bit magical. I love the AirPods because they just do these things where just the handoffs between, your phone and your computer. And I've got 2 laptops, an Apple TV and an iPhone right here. And it just goes seamlessly. I never even have to think about pairing Bluetooth or anything like that. And then I lost one of my AirPods in a storm drain while biking.
No.
So I had to use a normal set of Bluetooth headphones for a week. And I was like, holy crap, this is an amazing product. It's nothing does it like AirPods do.
I love it. No, that's great.
I mean, the audio quality is nothing to write home about, but just the workflow is incredible.
Yeah, I feel like Apple does a very good job about making those magical experiences. They're quite good about making UIs that just work how you would intuitively think that they should. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the AirPods, obviously, you open them up and it's like, oh, you want a pair? Here you go. Here's a picture of them.
Yeah, it even has that thing, not your AirPods. If you accidentally open up somebody else's AirPods, it's just all these little things that you wouldn't think to do, but just they're not in your face, but they just create a great experience.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Pete, dude, thank you so much for joining me. Let the people know where they can find you, and if they have any questions, where can they reach out?
Yeah, Instagram, I guess, pt.ox is my personal, and then, of course, Toolpath Labs and chatter.dev on Instagram. That's probably where I hang out the most. Don't look at my Twitter. It's a lot of posting about things I'm frustrated with manufacturing and VCs. So, yeah, find me on Instagram.
It's fun, though. I'll give you that. It's always a fun read sometimes. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great to catch up and kind of dive into more of the nitty gritty, I think, since the last appearance. It's been great.
Yeah. I can't believe it's been so long. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thanks to all the Patreon members who make the show possible. New ones, Chris, Scott, Mike, and Ty. Y'all make this show possible. Thank you all for listening, and I will be back next week.